This is Remy, and this is Oakley, and this is their roadmap to success. Oakley is excitable. She likes to bark a lot, and Remy is a puppy. And so Remy is just kind of following suit sometimes. So today we talked about just creating some new associations for Oakley specifically. The first thing we talked about today was exercise. A dog on average is going to need about 60 minutes of exercise per day. Some dogs more, some dogs less. For Oakley, we're going to need to find ways to get her moving outside of our traditional forms of exercise. She's not super food motivated, not super toy motivated. So we're going to maybe explore some play dates as options. She likes to go to the dog park, but part of her issue is that she gets too excited when she's in the car. When you are going to be taking her to do things and you know that she's going to get excited about those things, you want to make sure that you're setting her up for success beforehand. If you can, make her tired before you drive to your parents'. Get her to the point where she's going to get in the car and lay down versus get in the car and bark at all the things that are going on around her. If you can, or when you can, you want to make sure you're setting aside time to kind of desensitize her to the things that make her excited. Getting in the car and backing out of the driveway and pulling into the driveway again. Leashing up, but not actually going on the walk. Oftentimes we get to the point, or the dog thinks that their excitement might be accelerating the process. So Oakley gets excited about going on car rides and going for walks. So we want to slow those processes down and kind of break them down into the smallest digestible piece for her. So for leashing up, you're going to walk towards the leash. If she passes you, sit back down. Wait for her to calm herself down, then get up, and you're going to walk to the leash until she isn't passing you. Then you're going to ask her to sit. When she sits, if she sits, you're going to start the process of leashing her up. If she gets up, you're going to go sit back down again. At first, it's going to be a lot of start and stop, start and stop. When she's doing what you want, she's remaining calm and following the commands, then the process continues. But when she gets excited and she gets out of balance, then the process stops until she calms back down. Eventually, these processes will be much faster than they are at first. It's going to take some time, but that's okay. Make sure that you're trying to do as much as you can to provide her with some stimulation. We talked about potentially using some food dispensing toys if you decide to go the route of structured feeding, and do a little bit of research on your own end to see if that's something you want to consider. But exercise every 2 to 4 hours. If they're doing something you perceive as naughty, then you want to make sure that you're doing something to burn that energy. You can burn her energy, or she can burn her energy. Generally, if she's burning it, it's going to come in the form of something you don't like. The second thing we talked about are rules. The rules that we talked about need to be in place for at least 3 months, or as long as your problem is continuing. Make sure you're not breaking them as a reward, like we talked about. That's very confusing. The first rule we talked about was no furniture. So making sure that she's staying off of the couches. She's not allowed on the beds in the spare room. She's not allowed to get up and accost you. But we talked about the bed in your room. In your room, she can get up on the bed in the spot that you've given her after you are both laying down and comfortable. If she decides to lay in that spot, great, she can stay. But if she decides she's going to go somewhere else in the bed, she has to get off. She has to wait for her invitation to come up too. She doesn't get to decide she's coming up. She gets invited up. We talked about the door. So for her, it sounds like she sits at the door, but it might take a few repetitions of the word sit in order for her to do it. So when you go to the door, you're going to tell her to sit 1 time. If she sits within 3 seconds, the door opens. If not, sit down next to the door, wait for 1 minute. Then you're going to get up, give her the command again. If Remy sits and Oakley doesn't, Remy gets to go out. Oakley doesn't. Now she has to wait, this time 2 minutes, next time 4, 8, until she sits. It doesn't take very long normally. Normally after the second or third practice, they're sitting down instantly. The rule is the same on the way in. So she has to sit. If she doesn't sit within 3 seconds, you wait a minute, then 2, 4, so on and so forth. We also talked about keeping them out of the kitchen and when you're cooking and eating. I went over a boundaries exercise with you. If you forgot, or you want another, if you want a refresher, let me know. I can send you a video that goes over the boundary exercise that we did in the kitchen. But making sure that you're practicing that outside of when you're cooking is going to be helpful too. So that if you are by yourself and there's not someone there to defend the boundary for you, your dog understands. Make sure to also practice the out command that I showed you. So stand inside of the room, toss the treat out, make sure it's out far enough that they have to take all 4 paws out of the room. When they're licking up the treat, it's out or leave or whatever word you want to use. Go to all of the doorways. Practice that everywhere. Practice that in your bathrooms, the bedrooms, the laundry room. Practice in every area that you can so that anytime you need them to vacate the premises, you just say out and they go. That'll be helpful for the kitchen exercise though. They should be out of the kitchen anytime you're cooking, anytime you're eating. And at first, you're not going to be able to cook and defend the boundaries. So you want to practice that independent of trying to cook. Practice the leashing up exercise, independent of going on walks. Practice anything that you're going to want her to calm down for, independent of the actual activity. We oftentimes try and do everything all at once. This is going to give you the ability to help your dog learn how to stay calm through each step of the process. Other rules we talked about, making sure she calms down through the leashing process. She likes to go on walks, so let's use that to our advantage. Let's use that as a way to implement some self-control. She has to remain calm through the leashing process. She can't pass you when you're walking to the leash. She has to sit down before you'll attach it, so on and so forth. Did I miss any rules? I think I covered them all. If you get to a point where they are, one thing I forgot, they eat in the order of their rank. Better behaved dog would eat first. So if you get to the point where you are doing the structured feeding, whoever that day is being the gem, they get to eat first. Through passive training, you can give them words for eating. So the first time they take their first bite of food for like 3 months, they each hear their own word. So she takes a bite and she hears chimichanga. She takes a bite and she hears taco. She would understand taco for her being allowed to eat. She would understand chimichanga. They wouldn't understand the opposite. So that's another way you can use passive training if you guys do decide to go the route of structured feeding. If you go that route, once you get them understanding that they have to eat when the food's on the ground, you can use food dispensing toys when she wants to eat to burn some energy too. She would probably love that. And there's Oakley being a guard dog. The rules though that we talked about, they need to be in place for at least 3 months or as long as your problems are continuing. Make sure you're not breaking the rule as a reward. What we're doing here is just making small changes to your day-to-day to help her seeing you act more like a leader. If you're in charge, she doesn't need to be the guard dog. She understands that you guys have that handled. We also talked about petting. Some of this will be a refresher from when you guys were in puppy class, but petting with a purpose for her is going to be supremely important. She likes to paw to get attention. So if she comes to you and sits down and paws you, she doesn't get the attention. But if she comes and sits down, she gets it. Make sure that every time both of the dogs are receiving any attention, they have sat down beforehand to earn it. Eventually, they're going to start prepaying you. They're going to prepay you through the currency of obedience. They're going to come sit down in front of you as their way of saying, please pet me. View their sit as their way of saying, please. When they do, it's very important that you do reward them for that, or they're going to revert back to whatever it was that they were doing before to get the attention. She's already pretty good, but there is some pawing going on. You don't want her telling you to do anything. Anytime she starts barking at you to speed up a process, the process stops. It's accomplishing the opposite of what she wants it to accomplish. We also talked about the watchword for petting with a purpose. So if you walk in and the other one's petting and the dog is standing, paycheck. Paycheck just simply means stop petting. Ask the dog to sit. When they do, you can resume petting. After that window, you can explain that you had already asked the dog to sit, but you walked in and they stood up, as we talked about. Passive training, name all your toys. Eventually, you can teach them to pick them up and put the toys away. When they approach you, pet them and say come. When they sit by you, pet them and say sit. When they lay down, pet them and say down. We normally do a really poor job of telling our dogs the things that we like, and so they do the things we don't like instead. This is one way of guiding them through understanding the things that we do like. We went over the leash exercise, which I already kind of talked about. Make sure you're practicing that. If you have any questions about that, feel free to shoot me a text. I'd be happy to walk you through it. If you are interested in the loose leash walking class that'll be starting in a couple months, I'd call Becca. We have a waiting list for that. I don't know how long it is, but that would be something that you guys would want to do with the dogs independent. You might be able to take the class at the same time, but you'd be working with the dogs by themselves. Speaking of the dogs by themselves, I think when you're practicing, just so that Remy's not suffering, like you guys mentioned, to practice Oakley doing the leashing up exercise by herself, I would leash up 4 or 5 times for every walk you're actually taking. Then it's now kind of is this a drill or are we actually going to go for a walk? I'm not even excited anymore about it. We talked about a little counter conditioning, practicing the doorbell ringing and no one coming in. So like I was playing it on my phone, doing that and having her chewing a treat while the doorbell's ringing. Now I'm hearing a bell that is a good association versus I'm trying to keep the people out from coming in, or I'm excited that they're coming in. Same thing with cars. Sit at the back of the driveway. If you see a truck coming down the street, get that really great treat that she loves, keep it in front of her mouth while she's nibbling it and the truck's passing. Now we're creating a better association. If she won't sit and take a treat from you, she's overstimulated, so more distance. Maybe go to the side of your house and back up to the fence. But you want to make sure you're at a distance where she'll sit and take the treat from you. You're going to gradually get closer and closer to the street. I did this last summer with a Sheltie who liked to herd cars. We were eventually right next to Dodge doing this, and he wasn't barking at the cars. So this is something you totally can do. And if that's something that you run into issues with too, I'm sure we have a plethora of videos that cover that. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. If I did, shoot me a text, or if you forget something, I will be a continued resource for you guys. All right, this is Oakley and Remy's roadmap for success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.